My name is Nick B, and let's jump into this week's futures overview. So, let's start with the Forex Factory calendar, economic calendar. We have a pretty busy week. Mondays, nothing's going on. Tuesday, we have Employment Cost Index, CB Consumer Confidence. Wednesday, we have ADP Non-Farm Employment Change, as well as ISM Manufacturing PMI, JOLTS job openings, Federal Funds Rate, FOMC statement, FOMC press conference. Thursday we have unemployment claims, and then Friday we have NFP, as well as ISM Services PMI. So it's going to be a pretty busy week fundamentally. Um, this means that once we identify some of the levels that we'll be looking at on ES and NQ, we'll have to act accordingly. It's definitely going to be reaction over prediction. As you know, we've had pretty strong biases leaning towards, the market being at a bottom and us already getting out of that territory, but unfortunately, that is not the case. We were wrong. We're a little too early on that call there into last week, and of course, we had some major supports break. So let's start going over NQ. What I have over here, I'm going to clear this up. We have this 2-year daily. We have our highs, our lows, our lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. This is where we made our lows. Then we started to flip towards making, well, this is still a lower high, but we started making higher lows here, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. We got all the way up to here, higher high. We didn't quite make it down, so I guess this would be our lower low. I mean higher low, and then our high over here. And then we again we couldn't quite make it below this higher low here. That's why we were doubting the possibility of us breaking down. We thought, how many times can price action knock at this support? Well, it'll knock as many times as it needs to until we get either a breakdown or a bounce. And in this case, we got a breakdown. So the main level that we broke is really 14,600. Below 14,600, I saw the base right here. This was what I was mainly focusing on, this level right here of 14 to 60 basically. And again, we did slightly get below it. We made lows of 14,140 from last week, but currently we had an open with a slight gap up. We're going to take a look at it on the lower time frames. So what I'm thinking is there's a few possibilities that can play out. First things first, I want to assess the big picture just so it's not confusing. Let's clear the drawing set entirely and let's kind of map out the tech levels that we'll be eyeing. So first and foremost, I do need to point out this pivot point right here. It's going to be of use as long as we remain below 14,600. 14,006 we can place right here. Yeah, this would be fair. Right on the wicks, I want to place that there. Okay, so we've identified already on the daily the channel that we may or may not be in. Well, look at that. We have some history on these candles here. We have a rejection on here. And the level I'm pointing to right now is what, 14.3 roughly? 14.3. Again, I rather place this at the wicks, the support at the wicks, which comes out towards, it's not going to be perfect, but 14,260 give or take. So let me go ahead and plot that out right here. Okay. Now I'm gonna make this a different color as well, just so I don't get mixed up on the smaller time frames. I guess let's make it this greenish color. That'll be our support. And I say it's insignificant because it's not really a pivot level. It's not a previous higher high or a higher low or a lower low or a lower high. So it's just an area of where price action has had a few run-ins. It's good to consider, but again, not to rely on. Again, currently we're still slightly above it. I'm not I'm not saying that in case we bounce, but it's going to be key. I think if we slide below 14 to 60, ultimately, I think we're gonna make our way down into the channel of 14,000. Of course, first things first, we're gonna have to blow out 14,140 to the downside. 14,000 would come next. It's a pretty psychological SNR level, as well as if I place the support at 14K, you can see previously we had some history to it before when we broke out of 13,750. We got up to 14K, retested that breakout, and then we continued going higher. So let's see what happens when we come up on that level. Let me just plot that SNR as well. And I'm gonna make it a different color. I'm gonna make the insignificant ones about the same color. Make it 14K. Okay. Okay, so this is on the 2-year daily. Again, do I really want to cover more downside? No. No, I feel like, if this is a breakdown, to the extent that it's at, we just need to get below we have to stay below the 200-day EMA on the daily, which is 14,277. You have your crossovers. They look a little bit weak. No, no, no. Actually, it's going. You have the 20 crossing below the 50-day EMA, and then you have the 50-day, excuse me, the 20-day crossing below the 100-day EMA, and then you have the 50-day EMA above the 20. So yeah, this is a crossover to the downside. The only thing is, though, again, if we want to see more downside, ultimately I'd like us below the 200-day EMA on the daily, and if we can again stay below 14,260 area, we can target towards 14,140. Below 14,140, I'd pay attention to 14K, and then ultimately below 14K, the bottom line support for this is 13,750. I want to say I saw some people calling out 13.9. I saw some people calling out 14K. Again, very possible, definitely. Maybe some of the juice that we have going towards the downside runs out around 14K, maybe 13.9. But again, ultimately, the entire move that we've had to the upside basically has been fueled and held up ultimately by the fact that we got above 13,750 as a pivot point, and that's it. Um, so that kind of covers kind of the in the now. Um, do I want to break it down a little more? Let's see. Let's see. I'm just trying not to overdo it either. And yes, I did have a heavier lean into a bias of being bullish, which is usually something I don't do often. But I was just, I guess, caught up in the excitement that, hey, maybe finally we get a fresh breath of air. But again, that didn't play out. So we're reassessing. I like that we're coming to the board clean, and we'll be able to spot out the opportunities for this week. The only thing, it doesn't worry me necessarily, I'd say, but all the news that is going to be happening, that's going to make for an interesting week. Um, so okay, so this is what we have ultimately. Again, I just want to reiterate, we're from what I see, the channel that we're in between is 13,750 and 14.6, either above 14.6 and we can get direction possibly to the upside, or as long as we're below 14.6, the possibility of us heading lower is there as well. Let's break it down to the 4 hour, see if we can find anything on here. Yeah, I mean, you have this gap to fill down here. Hold on. Whoops. I mean, yeah, that gap kind of got filled. I want to say kind of got filled basically. Sheesh, okay. This isn't bad. I mean, this would be a savage entry right here. I just gotta check something. That's not bad. You see the level? I'm eyeing the history that we have going on here. And then we have a little bit of support going around here, as well as it was a previous all-time high. So if we can manage to maybe get above, what's this? 14,460. I would say 14,460 just to be safe. I think we can take a shot at maybe targeting 14.6. I think that's definitely in the books. Well, probably on the intraday it would be 14,500 first, and then above 14.5 we can look at 14.6. So let me actually place an alert here. Single, okay, at 1460. Perfect, at or above. So that's going to be a possible upside play that we might be able to fill. Now, yes, if we do break below 14,250 to 60, we can't hold that area. Sure, we could continue going lower, but let's see, what's that? That's about 100. You could take 100 points to the downside. Fair, fair, but I think, wait for a break of 14,140 and then target 14K. So I think I'm gonna set my alert not necessarily below 14,250, just in case in case we come down to 14,140, maybe 14,130, and it bounces. Um, I'd rather wait for a break of 14,140 to the downside, and then we could look to short. If in the moment, again on the intraday, if I really see that we're breaking down and it's really heading to the downside, we'll take a look at shorting a little bit aggressively, maybe at come on, maybe shorting at 14,240, but at the moment I don't want to do much as well, because at the same time this is considered a bit of a channel that we're in. We're really right now, at least, stuck between 14,460 and 14,140 if we want direction. Everything in between right now is just noise. Um, let's see, below 14,140, easily target 14K. And again, if you break below 14K, I think we technically should have no issues coming down to maybe that 13,750 pivot level. So let's see. That's what I see at the moment with NQ. Below 13,750, I mean, I think I really got to see a nuke flying for that to play out. But again, let's see. Let's see. I certainly don't know the future. I can't tell, but we can just go off of what the reaction of price is going to be. And again, it's going to be clear as day if we can get above 14.6 and manage to make our way towards 15K at least. I think above 15K that might seal the deal for us going higher. Ultimately, I think the goal and what really shifted for me is if we want to, oh yeah, for sure, if we want to really get out of this kind of bearish swing where the rips get sold, I think we'll have to break out of 15.5 for us to consider more confidence towards the upside on NQ. Otherwise, we're just not. We're not going to get that. It looks like higher lows are being broken, and we're making lower lows as well as lower highs. That's with NQ. Now, let's go over to ES. Is this the 2-year daily? Why is it so zoomed in? Okay. Is it really this zoomed in? Maybe it was the 3-year weekly? No, it's just zoomed in like that. It's weird. Okay. Okay, so let's clear the drawing set for this one as well. We'll start kind of fresh since we got our breakdown. Okay, so I gotta point out this level here, which is our 43.26. Okay, that's gonna be, you know what? That's going to be, I guess, the middle ground. If we can get over this level here, that should give us confidence to the upside. But really, our attention is going to point to the wicks over here of 44.30 ultimately. If we want to see price go any higher, we'd have to get above 44.30, and then we can look at possibly heading towards 45.60, 45.70 area. We'd have to take a look at clearing out these previous lower highs. Excuse me. Yeah. Previously, we'd have to take out these lower highs to make higher highs for the trend to shift. Otherwise, we could have more downside. It's very possible we continue making lower highs. Maybe we come up to 40 to 40 around here, I would say. Maybe we reject back down lower. 4200 was that first downside target right here. You see, we have some history right here, previously around this area as well. So 4200 definitely is a level we want to keep an eye on. If we can get above 4200, that might give us some light to the upside, but again, I wouldn't bet on it unless we break the previous lower highs of 44.30. Until then, I'd imagine that all the rips to the upside would continue to get sold off. So 4200 is going to be your first resistance level, 4210 really. Now, since we are breaking down and we are below 4200, I know Carlos has been eyeing 4150. It was his 50% retracement fib, or it was the 61.8, whatever the case may be. But below 4150, for me, it's 4200. I'm looking at the bottom end of the channel right here, which is basically your 4060 area, maybe even 4000. And the reason for that is we have these wicks lining up around here, which is your 4050 area. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that off. Let me extend this to the left as well. Let me see. Okay, so it acted as resistance here, here. This was a breakdown. This was a false breakout, but then we broke out actually. You have some resistance going on here. This was a false breakout. You got a breakdown, retest, and then continuation lower. This was a breakout. You're acting as support here, acting as resistance here, acting as support here. So this is a pretty solid level, I would say, to target to the downside if we can't get above 4,200. I think even if we take out the lows of 4120, I'm going to break it down to the hourly right now, we can possibly take a look at shorting down to 4,000. Now, if we do end up breaking below 4050, I think that's going to be my marker. Below 4050, we can really start taking a look at the previous higher lows of 3840. Heck of a stretch. I'm gonna say that right now. This is a heck of a stretch. I think I'd compare 3800 or 30. Yeah, no. To be fair, let me see. I would say 3,900 first. I would compare 3,900 as the equivalent to 13,750 on NQ. But for now, I'm going to leave this base here. I know 3,800 also previously this year and last year was a pretty interesting level where we tended to chop around for a few weeks until we either bounced off of it, broke out of it, or broke below it. I mean, it was a tough level. So I think that's all I'm going to cover on ES. There's no reason really to cover much more downside because we want to see what happens in the now, and it's either we break the channel that we're in between, we break below it, or we end up breaking out of it. Again, this is on the daily. Also, I want to highlight the main levels that we're in between, so I'm going to change the color up for these two. I'm going to make them green just so it doesn't confuse me. Let's make that green. Perfect. And now let's break it down to the 4 hour. Let's see if we get anything on there. Okay, so on the 4 hour, we can see some intraday levels that are pretty interesting here. Let's see. You have 4170. No, but it all goes to the same area, more or less. 4190. No, it's 4200 ultimately. Let's see this. 4178. Look at that. You have 4114. And what were the lows for last week? 4120, 4122. So I think if we can get below 4120, I think we might get a green light to continue shorting down towards 4063. I think that would be a solid first target. So I'm going to set up an alert here to the downside specifically at 4120 just to eye that at or below. And then upside, I mean, you got to go for 42. I know it's 4208, but let's zoom in a little bit. 4205. Okay, fair, fair. So, you know what? Just to be safe, I guess, um, that would confirm at least that we would head higher. I would say 4210. 4210, and then we could take a look at possible upside. We could take a look at looking for 42. Well, that's a heck of a jump. 4290. You would probably run into a little bit of trouble. Not really trouble. I mean, if you can clear 4235, 42, yeah, 4235, those previous lows, if you could clear that and make your way up towards 4290, yeah, 4290 is going to be that level and make those higher highs on the intraday. Well, for on the 4 hour, make those higher highs. You should have enough room to meet at the pivot, which is going to be your 4320, 4330 level. Again, that level would be this point right here. It's still, I would say, important, but similar to NQ, I think the attention has shifted into the previous lower lows and the lower highs over here rather than these pivot points here because this is basically where your price flipped. This was trend direction one way, and again, you could rely off of it as long as we were making higher highs and higher lows. But once the trend flipped again, we kind of got to focus on this more so than than the previous pivot levels. It's just good to have in mind because sometimes when we do clear these previous pivot points, supply and demand tends to pick up around those levels, and maybe we could get an opportunity for a long play if we can clear it. But again, my focus is probably going to be at 44.30 if we want to go any higher. Above 44.30, we could take a look at 45.60, and then above 45.60, we could make our way back towards 4600, 4630. 4630 still remains that infamous pivot level here that until we break out of, market's just not really going to be going higher in the moment. First things first, again, I am going to heavily say that if we can make it back above 4200 and make it above, I would even say, nope, it's got to be 14.6. It's got to be 14.6 and 4200, which sounds crazy because the difference in between those two levels, 4200 is more equivalent to 14,460. Tough one, because I feel it's just I feel safer, I feel more confident in possibly biting on a long if we clear 14.6, because it could give us room that price may attempt to retest the previous lower highs. But then again, we might leave a couple hundred points on the table if we wait that long as well. But no, you know what? I'm going to stick with it. Above 14.6, I think that's going to be the true direction towards upside. And then below the lows of 14.140, we can short. Same thing with ES, though. I would say 4,200. Above 4,200, you could possibly take a nibble. We could possibly take a shot at attempting a long towards 4,300. I think ultimately, if we can clear 4,300, again, that's going to give us a green light to go towards 44.30. And then again, the focus is now, for me at least, going to be on the previous lower highs and lower lows, on the patterns that we had happen recently. Otherwise, you know, no need to guess. Let's see one more time on the hourly is not going to really tell me anything. We did have that gap up. The gap didn't quite close, so maybe into the AM, maybe we fill the gap, maybe we bounce. Again, even if we get to 41.85, I would need to see 4200. Get me above 4200, we can talk about going long, maybe targeting 4290, 4280, and we'll go from there. So that's with ES. I'm very curious to see how NQ is going to look, where it's going to end up. VIX, where did VIX close? VIX closed at 21.27. Not exactly scary, but would I would really like to see us below 20 before we start leaning towards buying up these dips. At the moment, these dips, again, I don't trust them, again, because we're broke down, we're breaking down, and then we'd have to see how the fundies do before we do anything on there. I do want to also cover crude and gold. That's been pretty interesting for me to trade throughout the time. So let me clear the drawing set and we'll briefly go over it real quick. Yes, I have an alert at 88. So first things first, let's see. We're on the 2-year daily. Now, crude's a little different. I focus not too much on the past, but I do like what we have going on here. I've been basically playing anything from the channels of really 78 all the way up to 95. You have quite a few plays to make on the intraday levels. The daily is just good to identify the zones we're in. So let me mark off some levels that stand out to me, and that would be this one right here. Then we have, let's see, well, this is probably going to be on the intraday, but these levels are interesting for me. I'm going to leave it alone. Let me see. I'm going to mark, I'm going to mark it off for now. And just so I know it's a pivot, I'm going to make it yellow. And then the supports, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to plot the support around here. I want to focus on the now. Again, with crude, it's different. I don't really have to look at what the previous history was too much like on ES and NQ. Most of the setups that come to you, most of the setups that you see can be identified on the intraday levels, and that's kind of how we've been banging the trades off of these support and resistance levels. So let's see what the 4 hour looks like. Again, mind you, this is going to be our pivot level. Now it does look a bit messy here, right? We have supports that were made at 82, at 83 we have supports. So I'm gonna go ahead and just plot out the bottom line, which was 81.44 for future reference. And then we have a spike at 89.84. Let me see this. What's this? Oh, okay. So I was betting 88. I was betting on the breakout of 88 to go long, possibly here. I probably didn't end up taking it. I should most likely take it off for now because the channel, the zone that I've identified is really between 81.50 and 89.94. Why? Because we have the lows here and the highs that price made between the session was at 89.84. That's the reason. This would be a good guidance level, and currently we're basically just chopping around it. But again, this doesn't really tell us a setup just yet. The only setup you can possibly see is we break the lows of 81.50 and we may attempt a short targeting 78, or we wait for the breakout of 89.84, basically your 90 level if you want to be safe. And I think you should have no problems targeting 92.40 first, and then 90, 93.65, maybe even the 95 level. If, of course, if and when we get a break above the 90 level ultimately. But again, this is the 4 hour. Let's take a look at what's going on the intraday. I think just so I don't have a hard time also identifying the channels that we're really in between on the small time frame, I'm going to make these green. Perfect. All right, let's see the 1 hour. Okay, so we get a better idea of what's going on over here. Let's take a look. Okay, so what this really just confirms to me is don't take your chances in between these zones. Why would you do that? Wait for the breakout of 89 and then go long. You can target, again, you can target 92, I think, easily as the first take profit. Above 92, if you can get above 92.50, you can take a look at targeting 93.65, 93.50. Above 93.50, I would take a look at targeting 95. To the downside, ultimately, I think you get a break below 81.50, and again, you shouldn't have any issues targeting even 80 or the 79 level or 78. I would target probably 79.35 first because, and the reason for that is you have some build up here, you have some build up here in price action, you have some build up here. So my thoughts are that if and when price reaches this area, it might begin to stutter just because of previous history here. So you could trim a position, take some profits, and continue to let it run down to 78, or it starts to stutter. You trim a position, you start to see a bounce. Okay, you close out the position, but at least you secured something. So this is going to be the setup for crude. I'm going to set the alert at exactly 90 for upside, and then downside I want 81.50. That's fair. 81.50 breaks. We can take a look at shorting crude. Oops. Perfect. So those are our setups on crude. And last but not least, let's take a look at gold, GC. That's been pretty interesting to trade last few days. Same thing. Let's blow it up on the 2-year daily. Let's clear the chart up, and let's plot some points of interest. Well, I think I'm gonna have to do this. No. Let me see what this would look like. Maybe 5 years. Yeesh. Okay. Okay, no, that's excessive. Let's go back here. Okay. let's plot out the highs. Let's plot out this right here stands out to me. I'm looking at this level, that's why I plotted it. When you trace along it, yeah, this is kind of chop, but price, when it stayed below it, it was resistance. You got a false breakout here. Let's see, gap up, but then price again came down, retested basically the breakdown and continued lower. Again, we tried to break out, couldn't break out. Look at this, we broke out of this level, came down, retested, and continued higher. Good. Now I'm gonna go ahead and mark off this level right here, this middle ground of 20, 22, 20. And there we go. We have our setup basically on gold. Let me go ahead and plot this right here as well. Okay, and that's going to be our floor, 1902. Below 1902, I think price should have no issue coming down to 1823. Again, gold doesn't really move that crazy, but if it does, you could probably expect us to see us coming down towards 1823 below 1902 for the gap fill as well. But at the moment, we're really in between these levels right here of 1975 and what was that, 20. So let's go ahead and change up our channel so that we can identify it on the lower time frames a little easier. And this is our setup here, basically. Either we break below 1975 and we could take a possible short looking down. Maybe I think I would target 1950 first. Yeah, look at that. You have 1956 as your 20-day EMA. That's going to be your support. Let's see, your 50 is crossing over. Your 50 is crossing over right now the 100, which is pretty bullish. And then you have, let's see, the 100 is above the 200. So the crossovers on the EMAs for the daily is looking pretty bullish right now. Let's see what we're looking like on the 4-hour. Okay, 4-hour, similar here. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, break below 2003. You could, I mean, if you're a savage, break below 2003, you could take a short down to 1980 if you're a total savage. I don't have it in my blood for that. I would rather wait for a break of 1975, 10 cents. I'm gonna actually set the alert at 1975, and then I would target probably the first downside target. Yeah, it would be 1960, and then below 1960. And the reason I say 1960 is because you have all these MAs that are coming up as 1954. Then you have the wicks over at what is this, 1965. Again, once you're below this level, I think you should have no issues heading lower, at least down to 1945. But 1960 would be first. I would observe 1950 to 1960, how price would do around there. If price would begin to stutter, go sideways, I would probably exit out of the position just in case that, price gets a reversal. But if you can break down below 1950, you should have no issue coming down to 1945, below 1945. Again, probably come on down to 1920. Below 1920, make your way down to 1900. Again, that's a ways away, but that would be probably my downside targets. So let me set an alert here. Perfect. And upside, again, this looks pretty good. Above 2022.20, you should have no issues coming up on 2047. Man, I kind of like more upside. If equities continues to sell lower and the market continues to make lower lows and lower highs, and the VIX continues to spike and the dollar continues to do shitty, and yields, the bonds, the 10-year bonds keep going higher, yes, this is definitely not a bad play. 2022, you could probably target 2050. No, hold on. Let's be a little safe. You could probably target 2043 first, then you make your way to 2050. If you can clear 2050, you're probably going to come up on 2063. Above 2063, again, you should have no issue seeing 2085. But what are the odds, right? We're gonna have to wait for that break, and let's see, what is this, 2022? I'm gonna set it at 2022.30. That 10-cent confirmation, 22, oops. 30 at or above. Perfect. So that would be our upside target for a break of gold. Other than that, I mean, that's all she wrote. That is all she wrote. Let me see again. NQ. Yeah, if I didn't know any better, I'd say this looks like a bear flag on the daily. And then if we pull up even on the 4 hour, you could, you could kind of make this a bear flag. This would be your base right here, and then you could draw out the flag basically right here off the wick. So eventually it's either going to squeeze out of here and then we make our way to 14.5, 14.6, or we pour out of here. Well, the way bear flag should work is we get squeezed out of here to the downside. Um, Honestly, if we end up rejecting right around, what is this level? 14,460. If we cannot clear that for whatever reason, that might not be a bad idea to take a short as well over there, and then we can probably target easily 14,260 to the downside. Below 14,260 should have no issues coming down to 14,140. Again, below 14,140, I'd like to target 14K, and below 14K, you have your 13,750 pivot level. That's what NQ. ES, Yes, let's just briefly go over that one more time. Ultimately, above 4,200, I wouldn't mind taking a bite on a long, possibly targeting 4,230. That probably might not be the play. That would be a risky play considering that the trend right now has turned to being bearish. So the rips to the upside in theory should be sold off, but I wouldn't mind taking a bite on a long here if, again, similar to NQ, if NQ can't get above 14,460 and ES can't get above 42.10, let's be safe. If we can't get above those levels, fine. We could possibly take a short at targeting, the session lows that we made. That wouldn't be a bad idea at all. But again, we are probably going to have to tread very carefully this week. You have a lot of fundamentals coming up, a lot. So let's see what we get. Let's have a solid trading week ahead. And as always, thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys into the week. Cheers.